Hi, this is Chris from the Stephanie Miller Show. Please enjoy this exclusive clip from Political Voices Network.
You know, can I just say, J.D. Vance saying that, calling Democrats the bullies, and I'm like, you're only there because they tried to hang the last guy who was your boss, right?
Yeah, fun fact, right? I mean, facts matter, but don't worry about that. Yeah.
Right, yeah, because Trump sent a mob to hang the last guy in your job. So you have such a great perspective. I read your tweet. You said, let's set the record straight. I was in the room when Donald Trump crashed the weekly governors meeting led by Mike Pence. Trump praised Tim Walz's handling of the protests in 2020. It was also the same day Trump talked about wanting to shoot the protesters, wanted law enforcement to violently clear Lafayette Square, and stood in front of St. John's Church holding a Bible. It was one of the darkest days of the Trump presidency, a clear sign of what was to come. Facts matter. Once again, thank you for speaking out. And also, he's on tape saying what a great job Tim Walz did, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look, I was in the room for that call. I remember that meeting. So I remember, first of all, that meeting was supposed to be, I think it was a COVID task force meeting is what it was. And so that's why he came in and hijacks the meeting. He had a tendency to do that. And it was just an awkward kind of situation. But I remember him. He did go. He did praise Tim Walz. And then he, by the way, that was also a meeting where he was telling everyone that we needed to be aggressive against the protesters. We need to take charge of our cities. And this is all happening, though, in the context of like the behind closed doors meetings that were happening, where he was like advocating for the Insurrection Act, advocating for the misuse of the military against Americans, advocating for law enforcement hurting people, shooting protesters. Like all of that is happening that day. And I remember it so vividly, Stephanie, because I remember Mark Esper's face. I remember everyone just walking around the West Wing with this sort of like darkness around them of like, what is really happening here right now? Like, how are we going to navigate this situation? And I remember seeing Chris Wray, the head of the FBI, in that moment. I remember him showing up at the meeting and him looking at me and being like, why am I here? Looking confused as like, I don't only attend the COVID task force meetings. And he was like, oh, he was a backbencher, by the way. I only say that because I get called a backbencher a lot, but usually a backbencher is like where senior people sit when there's no more room at the cabinet table. And yes, your staff, so you sit there. But this is the director of the FBI sitting there.
Right.
Anyways, but I just, when I watched the attacks against Tim Walz and they were like trying to say like, oh, the burning cities, in Minnesota and all that. I honestly, I was angry about it because it brought me back to that moment of the disgust that we all felt that night. And I got to tell you, there were a lot of people who felt that way. Like Olivia, I walked in the next day, had conversations with staffers in the West Wing. They were upset. Yeah. And also, didn't he held the Bible upside down? I remember talking to people on my Pence's staff. Like, remember that? Like, it was just such a horrible, dark moment for us, for Olivia, our country.
I always say, I'm so struck by it's people that worked with him, that worked in the Trump administration like you, that are speaking out the loudest. 40 of his 44 cabinet members are not for him, including his vice president. It must bewilder you that this could even be close, right? Thank God things feel like they're moving in the right direction finally. But how does that make you feel to just go, oh my God, how much louder can we yell? The people that know best.
Yeah, it's hard because you're like, look, all of these people that are speaking out are people that have served in Republican administrations, worked in Republican politics. These are lifelong Republicans for the most part, right? I joined the national security community, so became very nonpartisan and served under different administrations. But for all of us to keep kind of coming forward and saying, look, we lived it. We saw this firsthand, and this man is dangerous, and we know what he's capable of. And the second time around, it's going to be even worse. But it is very hard. It's hard to watch sort of what's happening around our country. And I think for me, what gets me so upset is that, like, Trump is thriving because he wants us to hate each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? He's thriving because he thrives off of the divisiveness and hate, because that's what, like, basically fuels his campaign. And that's what J.D. Vance is doing too.
Mm-hmm. But it seems like joy is winning. I don't
want to hate our neighbors.
Right. That's what I mean. Right. It seems like joy and, whatever the opposite of everything Trump is peddling seems to be working, seems to be winning. And it just is such a a relief. I mean, you said, as someone who served in the Trump White House, I witnessed the destruction and chaos firsthand. A second Trump term will bring more turmoil. As a lifelong Republican, I may not agree with Kamala Harris on everything, but I trust her to protect our freedoms, uphold the rule of law, provide steady leadership on the world stage. That's why I'm voting for Kamala Harris. And you're in a group called Republicans for Harris, which is not really a small group at this point, is it?
No, it's a growing coalition. We have, we'll be doing a Zoom rally this evening. We'll have the wonderful Mark Hamill joining us. And it's former members of Congress. It's people who worked on the, Republicans for Nikki Haley voters that were out there during the primary. It's different voices coming together. But we have so far, it seems like we have a lot of support for this call, and I'm grateful for it. That tells me that the people that are tuning in, there's an audience that's out there that is very concerned about what's happening here. And a lot of it, to be honest, is like, Jeff Duncan has said this. I think I read this amazing op-ed by him where he says, like, the best way forward for the Republican Party to get back to a normal functioning party is to defeat Trump.
We just
and
played
Mayor
Giles of Mesa, Arizona. You probably saw saying all the same thing, know. But listen, here's the thing. I need you to, when we get our country back and then you get your party back, you need to stay with us here in the light.
Yes.
You are a Democrat now. Join us. Okay. But it's so interesting about what you tweeted. I grew up in a middle-class family. My dad grew up on a farm and was a hardworking truck driver. He'd identify with Tim Walz. Watching the Pennsylvania rally brought tears to my eyes. What an amazing duo to lead our country. Dad, I miss you, and I hope you're proud. I think the same thing, I have the same daddy issues with my Republican dad, Olivia. That's why you and I like each other. Because I just can't imagine him watching this, and he or Goldwater or anybody not just being appalled by what Donald Trump has done to this party and this country.
Yeah, I will just picture, Ronald Reagan, what must he be thinking, watching Viktor Orban fly down to Mar-a-Lago and hang out with Trump, watching basically J.D. Vance, all these Republicans basically behave like assets to Putin. Because that's how I see it right now, is that they parrot somebody, and some of these members of Congress in the Republican Party, they parrot Russian propaganda, which is dangerous,
hear
right?
Trump's, what was it, retelling of his conversation with Putin about Ukraine, which consisted of way and no way? Did you hear that? Okay, you got to play this for her. Okay. I'm just wondering, in your experience, did you ever hear world leaders have a conversation that included way and no way? Okay, here it is.
I know Putin very well. I got along with him very well. He respected me, and it's just one of those things. And we would talk a lot about Ukraine. It was the apple of his eye. But I said, don't ever do it. Don't ever do it. You can't do it, Vladimir. You do it, it's going to be a bad day. You cannot do it. And I told him things that what I do, and he said, no way. And I said, way.
Okay, so Olivia.
Hey, bros.
Right, totally.
Reads totally like a Valley Girl script, but I can't. Okay, this is such a clown show already. But if you watched his press conference or whatever that thing was with Elon Musk, that anyone thinks he would be fit to do anything, let alone be president, is still astounding, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's disturbing because we're in a very serious moment internationally on world affairs, right? And it requires like very complicated, thoughtful discussions. And so think about what those discussions would be like in a second Trump administration. Who's it going to be sitting around the table? It's going to be Kash Patel. What, Mike Flynn's going to enter the picture again? Yeah. Like who are the adults in the room the second time around? So that's going to be what the cabinet and the national security advisors, Stephen Miller's of the world. That is going to be who is going to be running the show. I mean, I fully expect him to have Putin come in for a head of state dinner. I fully expect him to do that, by the way. Yeah. And remember, I said this because I fully think that they'll roll out the red carpet. Yeah. And that at that point, like, can you imagine how horrifically appalling that would be? Yeah. Especially for the Republican Party.
Yes, and you're so important in this whole thing to not let them memory hole, to not let them lie about what happened, because you were there. You said is it normal for a president of the United States to call for mowing down Americans and shooting them? Because that's exactly what Trump did. I was in that meeting. Governor Tim Walz exhibited nothing but leadership, and you know it. You were responding to Scott Jennings slamming Tim Walz. I mean, it's just... Because I keep thinking, are we going to just memory hole his disastrous response to COVID, his wrecking the economy? I mean, just almost any subject you look at, right?
Yeah, and I think it's critical to remind people of that, right? Because I'm having conversations. I've had conversations with other people, and they're like, "Oh, I forgot about that," and I'm like, "Oh, did you forget about the moat and the alligators and wanting to shoot the migrants coming over? Did we forget about that too? Because we were back in, at medieval times, and that's how we were running the White House." I mean, because that was real.
I picture
all
sane.
Of that is real.
I picture sane people like you during those insane COVID press conferences he gave, just like in a back room, just pounding your head against the wall. Just, oh my God.
That's what was happening. I mean, there was a press room, and we were in the green room behind it, especially the day with the bleach and all of that went down. I remember looking around the room and just being like, I actually remember like having a binder and shutting it and just walking out and being like, okay, I'm done here. I'm going to go call the CDC because we're going to have to start to work on the bulletin that says, please don't ingest bleach. You will die. It's not going to cure COVID. I mean, all the work that comes with that. But think about like what's
that we live in a timeline that Lysol had to put out a tweet saying, do not drink our product.
Right.
Right.
Right. Yeah, and then you know what? People did. Right?
Yeah.
That's the sad part.
Yeah. Yeah.
People did.
Dear God. So yeah, by the way, you were asked on TV about the them pressuring Kamala Harris to do more interviews, and you said Kamala Harris is out there in the swing states. She's doing what she needs to do to really build the coalition that's going to get her elected. I just love that a lot of us seem to be kind of just ignoring the mainstream media and pundits and whatever, right? I mean, she's obviously running one of the best campaigns in history already.
She is, and look, I was out in Michigan with her last month, right before that she ends up, being the head of the ticket, and I thought that she was very thoughtful in the conversation she had. I was out there. It was a conversation with conservative women and center-right voters and moderate women on reproductive rights, and it was that conversation that really impacted my view about like she can do this. She understands how to broaden this coalition of people and bring them into the fold. And I heard a lot of feedback from people in the audience who said, I came here because I wanted to hear her out. I'm going to the Trump rally this weekend. I'm going to go listen to him. And they were like, but thank you for extending the grace and that bridge to us and having a conversation with us about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what she's doing. She's out there talking to the American people. She needs to be doing that. She needs to be local media. She needs to be talking like radio. I mean, there'll be time for the national media. It'll happen. Yeah. But right now, she just launched her campaign, right? She just officially became the nominee. Right. And also, she's still the sitting vice president.
Look at just the
most job to do.